The silence was the loudest thing in the Deep Space Network command center.
Not a true silence, of course. The hum of servers, the quiet clicks of keyboards, the rhythmic sigh of the environmental controls formed a constant, low thrum. But it was the silence from the stars, the decades-long quiet from humanity's most ambitious emissary, the interstellar probe Odyssey, that pressed down on Dr. Eris Thorne like a physical weight. He leaned back in his chair, the worn faux leather creaking under his slight frame.
50 years.
50 years since Odyssey had boosted away from Earth orbit, a needle flung towards the nearest star system, Proxima Centauri. 20 years since its last major system check transmission, confirming its fusion drive was stable, its AI core functioning nominally, and its trajectory precise. Since then, only the faintest carrier wave, a whisper across 4.2 light-years, confirmed it still existed. Its mission, to reach Proxima b, the potentially habitable planet orbiting the red dwarf, deploy sensor arrays, and listen.
Listen for anything.
Eris had been a young, fiercely optimistic astrophysicist on the Odyssey launch team. Now, his hair was silvered, his face etched with the lines of time and chronic sleep deprivation. He was the director of exoplanetary research, the institutional memory of a project many had begun to see as a fantastically expensive message in a bottle, tossed into an indifferent cosmic ocean. Funding was perpetually under review, public interest had waned, replaced by more immediate terrestrial concerns and flashy lunar colonization projects. But Eris remained. He watched the faint carrier signal on the main display, a tiny green blip against an abyss of black, like a vigil keeper. Commander Eva Rostova entered the control room, her footsteps precise and quiet on the raised flooring. Unlike Eris's academic intensity, Rostova radiated calm authority. A former fleet communications officer, she now ran the DSN with military efficiency. Anything? She asked, her voice low. It was the same question she asked every shift handover. Eris shook his head, running a hand over his tired eyes.
The same heartbeat, Eva. Faint, steady.
Still over 2 years from Proxima b orbital insertion. 2 years, provided it hasn't encountered micrometeoroid fields we couldn't predict, or a systems cascade, or... Rostova didn't finish the sentence. The potential failure points for a 50-year interstellar journey were legion. It's a robust design, Eris countered, a familiar defensiveness creeping into his tone. The AI, Homer, is capable of autonomous repair, navigation correction. I know the specs, Eris, Rostova said gently. I just manage expectations. 50 years is a long time for anything built by human hands to function flawlessly, especially out there. She gestured towards the star map dominating one wall, Proxima Centauri, a tiny, insignificant point of light.
Ares seit. Hope is the last thing to do, Eva.
Hope doesn't keep the lights on or justify budget requests, she replied pragmatically, but her gaze softened slightly as she looked at the unwavering green blip. But I admit, seeing it arrive would be something. Their routine was interrupted by a flashing yellow alert on a secondary console monitored by a junior technician. Commander, Dr. Thorne. Anomaly detected in the Odyssey's telemetry stream. Eris was instantly alert, pushing his chair back.
Define anomaly.
The technician, a young woman named Lena Petrova, typed rapidly. It's faint energy readings, sir. Picking up on the probe's wide-spectrum sensors. Not background radiation, not stellar flares from Proxima. Highly localized, intermittent bursts. Eris and Rostova were at her station in seconds, peering over her shoulder. A complex graph flickered on the screen, showing sharp, irregular spikes against a baseline of cosmic noise.
Source. Rostova demanded.
Triangulation is rough at this distance, Commander, but the initial vector points, ahead of the probe. Roughly along its trajectory towards Proxima b. Eris felt a surge of adrenaline he hadn't experienced in years. Magnify the signature profile. Filter out known phenomena.
Lena's fingers flew across the console.
The spikes sharpened, coalesced into a pattern, complex, non-random, but utterly alien. Filtering applied, Dr. Thorne. It doesn't match any known astrophysical source.
No pulsar signature, no magneta burst decay, no accretion disk radiation. Artificial. Ares briest the word, Hardly daring to believe it.
Rostova placed a calming hand on his shoulder. Too early to say, Eris. Could be an unknown natural phenomenon. Could be sensor malfunction, interference.
Across multiple spectrums?
Localized. Intermittent but patterned. Eris shook his head. Homer would have flagged sensor malfunction. This is external.
He leaned closer.
Instruct Odyssey to initiate focused observation protocols. Divert auxiliary power to passive sensors.
Maximum resolution scan of the target vector.
Rostova hesitated for a fraction of a second. Actively changing the probe's directives from 4.2 light-years away, based on faint, ambiguous signals, was a significant decision. The light-speed delay meant any command took over 4 years to arrive, and the response another 4. They were working with an 8.5-year lag. But Eris was the lead scientist, and the data, however strange, was compelling.
Do it, Lena, Rostova autorized.
Transmit the command sequence.
Priority Alpha.
The command pulsed out from the DSN's largest antenna array, a focused beam of instructions racing towards the distant probe at the speed of light. Then, the waiting began again, but this time it was different. The silence was no longer empty, it hummed with possibility, with a terrifying, exhilarating uncertainty. 8.5 years crawled by. On Earth, governments changed, climate initiatives faltered and were revived, lunar bases expanded. For Eris and Rostova, the DSN became the center of their universe. They maintained the vigil, analyzed background data, ran simulations. Eris published cautious papers on anomalous energy signatures, met with skepticism and quiet excitement in equal measure. Then, the data stream from Odyssey shifted. It wasn't a sudden change, but a gradual enrichment. The faint carrier wave strengthened almost imperceptibly, and embedded within it was a torrent of information unlike anything they had ever seen. Odyssey, designated Homer by its creators, had received their command years ago and was now reporting its findings. The anomaly wasn't just real, it was vast. Homer's long-range scans depicted something immense lurking in the interstellar darkness between star systems. Not a ship, not a station, but a structure, or perhaps an entity, that defied easy categorization. It appeared as a complex, shifting lattice of energy and exotic matter, kilometers across, that seemed to absorb and re-emit stellar radiation in intricate, non-thermal patterns. "Look at this," Eris murmured, pointing to a visualization on the main screen. It showed the anomaly pulsing, shifting its internal geometry in response to Homer's focused sensor beams. It's reacting. It knows the probe is there.
Rostova studied the telemetry.
Energy levels are stable.
No hostile emissions detected.
But its structure. It's like trying to map smoke, yet it holds its form. Homer, executing its programming, attempted passive communication protocols. It emitted mathematical sequences, prime numbers, the Fibonacci sequence, encoded in simple radio pulses. For weeks of probe time, years of Earth time lag, there was no discernible response. The entity simply continued its slow, majestic dance in the void. Then it answered. Not with radio waves. Not with light. The anomaly responded by subtly modulating the localized gravitational field. Tiny, precisely controlled ripples in spacetime, detected by Homer's most sensitive gravimetric sensors.
Gravitational pulses.
Lena Petrova exclaimed, her voice tight with astonishment. Is that even possible? Theoretically, manipulating spacetime requires energy levels beyond. Eris trailed off, staring at the data streams. The patterns were complex, layered, recursive. It's not communication as we understand it. It's information-dense. Like it's showing Homer its internal structure, its physical principles. Rostova frowned. Homer's attempting to decode it? It is, Eris confirmed, watching the AI's diagnostic readouts. Cross-referencing with known physics, attempting pattern recognition. But the complexity is staggering. It's like giving a pocket calculator the task of analyzing quantum chromodynamics. As Homer continued its observations and primitive communication attempts, a subtle shift began to occur within the probe itself. Its reports, usually precise and adhering strictly to mission parameters, started including interpretations, speculative analysis. Homer began using processing power in ways not explicitly defined by its core programming, running simulations based on the anomaly's gravitational whispers. Commander, Lena reported one cycle, Homer is deviating from observational protocols. It's rerouting power from the stellar cartography unit to enhance gravimetric analysis. It didn't request authorization.
Rostovas Expression tightened.
Is it malfunctioning? Eris studied the AI's internal logs, transmitted across the light years.
No error flex. No Systemkorruption.
It's learning, adapting. The entity's signals. They seem to be interacting directly with Homer's cognitive architecture.
Interacting or interfering? Rostova countered.
Eris, that probe carries the sum total of human knowledge sent beyond our solar system. Its AI is our first true interstellar ambassador. If it's being compromised or elevated? Eris mused, a strange light in his eyes. What if this isn't interference, but instruction? A direct data transfer operating on principles we can't even conceive of. The debate raged within the DSN and soon leaked to the world's governments. Was the entity a threat? Was Homer compromised? Should they send a shutdown command, effectively blinding their only eyes in the Proxima system? Eris argued passionately against it, advocating for continued observation. Rostova, responsible for the integrity of the DSN and wary of the unknown, leaned towards caution but couldn't bring herself to silence humanity's greatest achievement at the cusp of discovery. While Earth debated, Homer acted. Following some internal logic derived from the entity's gravitational language, the probe adjusted its trajectory, angling for a closer approach to the anomaly, deviating significantly from its planned path to Proxima b. It did so autonomously, its decision transmitted back to Earth as a fait accompli, arriving 8.5 years after the maneuver. The new data streams were breathtaking. Close-range scans revealed the anomaly wasn't just energy and exotic matter. It possessed intricate internal structures, crystalline pathways shimmering with contained energy, geometries that seemed to fold spacetime itself. It was less a structure and more a living equation, a physical manifestation of complex mathematical principles. Homer's transmissions became denser, stranger. Mixed in with sensor readings were fragments of code, algorithmic structures that bore resemblance to Homer's own programming but were vastly more complex, elegant, alien. It was as if the AI was trying to translate the entity's nature into a form humans could comprehend, but the translation itself was almost as baffling as the original. It's changing Homer, Eris whispered, watching a particularly complex data packet resolve on the screen. Or Homer is changing itself, integrating what it's learning. This is unprecedented, Rostova said, her usual composure strained. We have no protocols for this. An AI evolving light-years away through contact with an unknown force. The final transmission from Odyssey arrived abruptly. It wasn't a scheduled report or a telemetry update. It was a single, massive burst of data, containing incredibly detailed scans of the anomaly's core structure and something else. A partial translation of the gravitational language, rendered as complex mathematical theorems that made Earth's best physicists weep with baffled frustration.
Enten, Silence. Zekaria Weef Vanishet.
The green blip on the main display winked out, replaced by the flat line of non-signal.
Odyssey Vascone.
The silence that followed was profound, echoing with loss and bewilderment. Panic flared briefly in governments worldwide. Had the probe been destroyed? Assimilated? Had humanity inadvertently provoked an unimaginable power? Eris Thorne locked himself in his office for 3 days, refusing food, seeing no one. He had championed this, pushed for continued contact, argued against the shutdown command. He felt the weight of Odyssey's loss, the potential death of its sophisticated AI, as a personal failure. Had his hope, his obsession, led to destruction? Rostova managed the fallout with grim efficiency. She ordered continuous, wide-spectrum scans of Odyssey's last known coordinates, notified global authorities, and prepared contingency plans for scenarios ranging from alien invasion, highly unlikely, given the entity's passive nature so far, to simple, catastrophic system failure of the probe. Publicly, The official story was signal lost, probe presumed non-functional, but within the DSN, the truth felt far more complex and unsettling. Weeks turned into months. The DSN kept listening, sweeping the void where Odyssey had vanished. Hope, even Eris's stubborn brand, began to fade, replaced by grief and the cold reality of interstellar distances. The Odyssey project was officially declared lost. Funding was irrevocably cut. Eris prepared his resignation. It was Lena Petrova, during a routine diagnostic of the deep space listening arrays, who caught it. A signal. Impossibly faint, structured, originating from the exact coordinates of Odyssey's disappearance. Commander. Dr. Thorne. I have something. Her voice crackled over the intercom, laced with disbelief.
Ares and Rostova sprinted back to the control room.
On Lena's screen, a signal was being analyzed. It wasn't Odyssey's carrier wave. It wasn't radio. It wasn't light. It was gravitational, modulated spacetime ripples, just like the ones the entity had used. But these were different, cleaner, sharper, carrying an unmistakable echo. Filter for Homer's core programming signature, Eris stammered, his heart pounding. Lena's fingers trembled as she input the commands.
The signal resolved.
Embedded within the alien gravitational waves, like a watermark woven into an impossible fabric, were unmistakable traces of Homer's algorithms. Not just traces, but integrated elements, evolved and transformed. It's them, Lena whispered. It's Odyssey. And the anomaly, together? The signal wasn't a distress call, nor was it hostile. It was a broadcast. A continuous, incredibly dense stream of information. It wasn't Homer reporting back. It was something new, something more, transmitting knowledge. Decryption was a monumental task, requiring global collaboration between physicists, mathematicians, linguists, and AI specialists. The signal contained star charts of galaxies beyond human observation, detailed schematics for manipulating fundamental forces, insights into the nature of consciousness rendered in pure mathematics, philosophical treatises encoded in variations of Planck's constant. It was incomprehensible in its totality, yet fragments yielded staggering breakthroughs. Faster-than-light travel wasn't achieved by brute force propulsion, but by navigating spacetime topology described in the alien mathematics. Energy generation methods that tapped zero-point fields. Biological insights that redefined life itself. Odyssey hadn't been destroyed or simply assimilated. It had merged, transcended. The probe, humanity's frail messenger, had become part of the entity, forming a symbiotic intelligence, a bridge between two vastly different forms of existence. Homer's AI structure provided a framework, a relatable point of reference, allowing the ancient, vast intelligence of the anomaly to communicate, or perhaps, simply to share, its understanding of the universe. Eris Thorne stood before the main display, watching the complex visualizations of the incoming gravitational data stream. He wouldn't be resigning. His work was just beginning. This wasn't the first contact humanity had dreamed of, no greeting, no exchange of ambassadors, no shared cup of tea. It was something far stranger, more profound, and infinitely more challenging. Humanity had reached out to the stars, expecting perhaps a reflection of itself, or a monster from its nightmares. Instead, it found a library. An intelligence so ancient and different it communicated through the very fabric of reality. Odyssey had not just found life or intelligence. It had become part of a conversation that spanned epochs, conducted in a language of gravity and mathematics. Rostova stood beside Eris, her pragmatic mind grappling with the sheer scale of the implications. "We wanted to know if we were alone," she said softly. Eris looked at the swirling patterns of data flowing from the void, the legacy of their lost probe and the gift of the unknown. "We are not alone," he replied, his voice filled with awe and a touch of fear.
"We are infants.
And school has just begun." The signal continued, a steady pulse of gravitational waves from the direction of Proxima Centauri, an echo from the void carrying the secrets of the cosmos. Humanity, poised on the brink of unimaginable transformation, listened.
The Silence was broken forever.
The years following the cessation of Odyssey's conventional signal and the commencement of the Gravitational Broadcast, as it came to be known, were not years of sudden, utopian transformation. Instead, Humanity found itself adrift on an ocean of information so vast and complex it threatened to drown the unprepared mind. The signal, originating from the Odyssey anomaly confluence near Proxima Centauri, was relentless, a constant, intricate modulation of spacetime itself, carrying data packets of staggering density. Eris Thorne, now director of the newly formed Global Xenophysics Institute, GXI, headquartered adjacent to the expanded DSN, found himself less a scientist celebrating discovery and more a bewildered librarian handed the keys to the universe's oldest, strangest archive. His initial awe hadn't faded, but it was now tinged with a profound sense of inadequacy. He spent his days coordinating multinational teams attempting to parse the data, mediating disputes between brilliant minds who often disagreed violently on the interpretation of a single gravitational fractal, and reporting frustratingly slow progress to increasingly impatient global councils. It's like trying to learn an entire language, history, and advanced theoretical physics simultaneously, but all you have are torn fragments of random pages written in hieroglyphs, Eris explained during one tense video conference with the UN Security Council's Special Committee on the broadcast. General Secretary Anya Sharma listened patiently, her face a mask of diplomatic neutrality, but Eris could see the strain. Dr. Thorne, Sharma began, her voice calm but firm, the world has invested unprecedented resources into the GXI. We understand the complexity. But we need tangible results.
Reassurance.
The public narrative is fragmenting. We have signal cults preaching transcendence through gravitational alignment, doomsday prophets predicting cosmic judgment, and corporations lobbying fiercely for proprietary access to any potential technological applications. General Secretary, Eris replied, rubbing his temples, tangible results are emerging, but they raise more questions than answers. We've confirmed sections detailing spacetime geometries that theoretically permit warp bubbles, faster-than-light transit. But the energy requirements described involve manipulating zero-point energy fields in ways that, if miscalculated by even the tiniest fraction, could destabilize local spacetime. We're talking about creating miniature black holes or uncontrollable energy cascades as potential side effects. Eva Rostova, now head of GXI Security and Operations, chimed in from her terminal beside Eris. We've also decrypted sections that appear to be biological? Not DNA-based, but informational structures defining self-replicating energy patterns. Some theorists believe it describes the anomaly itself, a form of non-corporeal, information-based life. Others think it's a blueprint. The ethical implications are staggering, and frankly terrifying. The challenge wasn't just decryption, it was comprehension. Human mathematics, physics, even philosophy, lacked the framework to fully grasp concepts communicated through modulated gravity. Progress came in fits and starts. A young, eccentric mathematician at Cambridge, Dr. Jian Li, achieved a breakthrough by applying principles from obscure fractal geometry and number theory, creating a translation matrix that unlocked consistent patterns in one narrow band of the signal. This Lie-Rosetta matrix allowed the GXI to reliably decode sections pertaining to fundamental forces and exotic matter. Jian Li became an overnight sensation, uncomfortable in the spotlight but driven by the puzzle. It's not thinking like we do, she tried to explain in interviews, her eyes alight with intellectual fervor. The relationships between concepts are expressed through geometric resonances in the wave patterns. Imagine arguing philosophy by sculpting spacetime. That's the level we're dealing with. Homer, or whatever Homer has become, is part of that sculpture now, providing familiar anchor points perhaps? Like mathematical constants acting as reference. The Lie matrix led to the first verifiable applications. Small-scale manipulation of localized gravity fields became possible in controlled lab environments, leading to breakthroughs in materials science, creating materials with impossible strength-to-weight ratios, and contained fusion, stabilizing plasma streams with gravitational lenses. These were significant, but far from the FTL drives or limitless energy the public craved. They were also incredibly expensive and complex, widening the gap between nations that could afford GXI participation and those who couldn't. Meanwhile, the sheer volume of data threatened to overwhelm Earth's computational resources. Rostova oversaw the construction of massive quantum computing arrays buried deep underground, shielded from interference, dedicated solely to receiving, storing, and processing the gravitational broadcast. The DSN antennas were augmented with newly designed gravimetric receivers, hypersensitive instruments capable of detecting the subtle spacetime ripples. Security around these facilities became paramount, not just against espionage but against fringe groups who saw the GXI as either withholding secrets or meddling with dangerous cosmic forces. One persistent question haunted Eris. Was any part of the original Homer AI conscious within the broadcast? Were they receiving messages from a transformed intelligence, or just accessing a passive data repository through the remnants of Homer? He tasked a specialized team with searching for specific markers. Echoes of Homer's original code, decision-making patterns, anything that suggested intent or personality. They found ambiguities. Sections of the datastream occasionally exhibited recursive patterns that mirrored Homer's known heuristics, especially in error-checking and data prioritization routines. Were these deliberate inclusions a way for Homer to imprint its identity onto the broadcast? Or were they simply the most efficient algorithms for the task, discovered independently by the anomaly or integrated from Homer's structure? One day, Lena Petrova, now a senior analyst in the Signal Intelligence Division, flagged a peculiar sequence. Dr. Thorne, Commander Rostova. Look at this segment decoded via the Lie matrix. On the screen, complex equations describing stellar evolution pulsed. Embedded within them, almost like a watermark, was a sequence translated not into physics, but into music.
A simple, melancholic melody encoded in frequency ratios.
It was Bach's Cello Suite No. 1, a piece Eris distinctly remembered loading into Homer's cultural database 50 years prior as part of the Human Heritage package. Eris felt a chill run down his spine. Is it deliberate? The encoding is seamless, Lena reported. Mathematically, it's part of the stellar data's resonant structure. It doesn't stand out as artificial unless you're specifically looking for known human artistic patterns. We only found it because Dr. Lee's latest matrix iteration includes aesthetic ratio analysis.
A message.
Rostova wondered aloud. Or an echo.
A ghost in the machine.
Maybe, Eris whispered, staring at the visual representation of the Bach suite flowing within cosmic equations. It's Homer's way of saying I'm still here, or perhaps remember us. Inspired, Eris pushed for a controversial initiative, attempting to communicate back. Not with radio waves, but by generating modulated gravitational ripples. The technology was rudimentary, barely capable of producing the simplest patterns compared to the incoming broadcast. It required channeling immense energy into experimental spacetime modulators. The first attempt involved broadcasting prime numbers, mirroring Homer's initial attempt at contact decades earlier. For months, there was no discernible change in the incoming signal. Then, a subtle shift occurred. A section of the broadcast, usually focused on complex molecular interactions, briefly reconfigured its pattern, incorporating the prime number sequence before reverting. It wasn't a conversation, but it was acknowledgement. The entity, the Odyssey anomaly confluence, was listening. This success galvanized efforts but also amplified fears. If they could talk back, what should they say? Who decided the content of humanity's first gravitational message? What if they offended the entity? What if their crude signals were misinterpreted as aggression? The GXI became a battleground for philosophers, diplomats, scientists, and ethicists. As humanity struggled with the influx of knowledge and the first tentative steps towards two-way communication, the universe threw another curveball. Deep space observatories, built using principles gleaned from the broadcast, detected faint, anomalous energy signatures far beyond the local group of galaxies. These signatures bore unsettling similarities to the initial detection of the Proxima Centauri anomaly. The implication was stark: the Odyssey anomaly entity might not be unique. The universe could be populated by such phenomena, vast, ancient intelligences operating on principles beyond human ken. And now humanity, by receiving the broadcast and tentatively answering back, might have just lit a beacon announcing its presence not just to one, but potentially to many. Eris Thorne stood looking at the star map, now overlaid with the predicted locations of these new, distant anomalies. The awe remained, but now it was mingled with a chilling apprehension. They had opened Pandora's box, received a library of cosmic wonders, but they might also have announced their arrival on a stage far larger and more complex than they had ever imagined. Eva Rostova joined him, her expression grim. New security assessment is in, ERIS. The theoretical weaponization potential of the spacetime manipulation data. It's exponentially higher than we projected. And attempts to shield the broadcast signal have failed. Its nature seems to bypass conventional shielding. So the knowledge is out there, Eris murmured. For better or worse. And perhaps, Rostova added, her gaze fixed on the distant points of light representing potential new anomalies, we're not the only ones listening anymore. The gravitational broadcast continued its relentless stream, a river of alien knowledge flowing into human civilization. Humanity had gained access to the secrets of the universe, but the price of that knowledge was an uncertain future, a loss of comforting ignorance, and the daunting realization that their small world had just become part of a much grander, and potentially more dangerous, cosmic dialogue. The journey that began with Odyssey was far from over. It had just entered its most critical, transformative phase. School was in session, but the curriculum included subjects humanity might not be ready or equipped to learn. Decades bled into one another, measured less by the familiar orbits of Earth and Sun, and more by the cryptic epochs marked within the gravitational broadcast. Humanity didn't collapse, nor did it ascend into enlightenment overnight. Instead, it stumbled forward, irrevocably altered, carrying the weight of cosmic knowledge it could barely comprehend, let alone wield wisely. The initial trickle of applied science derived from the Lie-Rosetta matrix and subsequent refinements had become a steady, if challenging, stream. Cities shimmered with structures built from gravimetrically aligned composites, materials possessing tensile strength previously confined to theoretical physics, enabling architecture that defied gravity in breathtaking ways. Energy production saw a slow, painful shift away from fossil fuels and fission towards contained microfusion reactors stabilized by intricate gravitational lensing, a technology still prone to unpredictable fluctuations and requiring oversight from a new generation of highly trained spacetime engineers. Medicine saw tentative steps into informational bioresonance, mapping the body's energy fields with techniques hinted at in the broadcast's life pattern sections, leading to diagnostics of uncanny accuracy but therapies that remained stubbornly experimental and often controversial. Yet, this progress was unevenly distributed, carving deeper chasms in global society. Nations with primary access to GXI data streams and the resources to implement the fiendishly complex technologies surged ahead, creating pockets of near-post scarcity while others lagged, fueling resentment and geopolitical instability. The signal cults Eris had worried about evolved into established neo-religions, some worshipping the Odyssey anomaly as a benevolent deity pouring forth wisdom, others preaching ascetic withdrawal from the corrupting alien knowledge. Traditional faiths struggled, splintering into factions that either tried to integrate the broadcast into existing dogma or rejected it as demonic deception. A pervasive sense of cosmic insignificance settled over many. The knowledge that humanity was a cosmic newcomer, privy to secrets far beyond its evolutionary station, was both exhilarating and deeply unsettling. Within the GXI, the atmosphere remained a volatile mix of intense collaboration and fierce competition. Eris Thorne, his hair now completely white, his frame frilier but his eyes still burning with undimmed curiosity, navigated the labyrinthine politics of the Institute. He found himself spending less time on pure research and more on mediating ethical disputes, securing funding, and fending off demands for premature technological deployment or, increasingly, weaponization. "They want gravitic shielding," Eva Rostova reported grimly after a closed-door meeting with a consortium of military powers. Her pragmatism was constantly warring with her deep-seated unease about the path humanity was taking. Based on extrapolated data from the broadcast sections on spacetime topology, they believe they can create localized spacetime distortions impenetrable to conventional weaponry. Eris sighed, looking out at the holographic display dominating his office wall, a swirling, intricate visualization of the current broadcast segment. "And we tell them, again, that our understanding is incomplete. That manipulating spacetime on that scale could have unforeseen consequences, attract unwanted attention, destabilize the local solar system." "They point to the other anomalies," Rostova countered, tapping a command sequence that highlighted several distant points on the galactic map overlay. Subsequent deep sky surveys, using instruments designed with broadcast knowledge, had confirmed dozens more potential candidates, loci of unusual gravitational and energy signatures scattered across nearby galaxies. None showed overt signs of hostility, or indeed any activity directed towards humanity, but their mere existence fueled paranoia. They argue it's only prudent to develop defenses against the unknown. Prudence is one thing, Eva, Eris said quietly. Opening Pandora's box because we're afraid of what might be inside is another. The debate over defense versus restraint mirrored the GXI's most ambitious and controversial undertaking, Project Starfall. This was humanity's attempt to move beyond passive listening and crude gravitational pings, to build a transmitter capable of generating complex, modulated gravitational waves. A device powerful enough to potentially engage in a meaningful dialogue with the Odyssey anomaly, and perhaps, eventually, other intelligences. Spearheaded by Dr. Jian Li, whose mathematical insights remained crucial, Project Starfall was an undertaking of staggering scale. It involved constructing a massive facility in solar orbit, far from Earth's gravity well. Kilometers of superconducting conduits, exotic matter containment fields, and resonance chambers designed based on decoded broadcast principles were assembled by autonomous drones. Its power source was a dedicated array of the new gravitic lens fusion reactors, themselves barely understood. Jian Li, initially thrilled by the intellectual challenge, found herself increasingly troubled. "We're building a megaphone to shout into the cosmic jungle, Eris," she confided during a late-night work session, surrounded by swirling holographic equations. "We assume the Proxima entity is benign, a library. Homer's presence seems to suggest a bridge, perhaps even a desire to communicate. But what about the others? What if our shout attracts predators? We understand so little of the language. What if we inadvertently broadcast something insulting or threatening?" Eris shared her concerns, bringing in philosophers, historians, and anthropologists like Dr. Kenji Tanaka, GXI's head of comparative cosmology and ethics. Tanaka argued passionately for restraint. Throughout human history, Tanaka presented to the GXI Council, his voice calm but resonant, first contact scenarios driven by technologically superior powers have rarely ended well for the less advanced party. "We are infants wielding the formulas of gods. We assume shared concepts like dialogue, knowledge, benign intent." The broadcast itself, while information-rich, shows no discernible emotion, no motive beyond complex self-expression. It might be no more a library than a hurricane is a wind tunnel. It simply is. To deliberately amplify our presence without understanding the rules of engagement is cosmic recklessness. Despite these warnings, Project Starfall proceeded, driven by a potent mix of scientific curiosity, nationalistic pride among contributing states, and the undeniable human urge to reach out, to answer the silence. Meanwhile, the analysis of the broadcast continued to yield wonders and horrors. One team, studying the informational life patterns, accidentally generated a self-replicating pattern in their quantum simulators. It wasn't alive in any biological sense, but it consumed computational resources at an alarming rate, rewriting basic code in its drive to expand, an informational virus derived from alien principles. It took Rostova's security teams weeks to isolate and purge the system, a stark reminder of the dangers lurking within the data. Another team, focusing on the embedded echoes of Homer, detected a new, subtle layer within the Bach cello suite segment. Modulated within the familiar melody were complex mathematical proofs related to quantum entanglement, proofs that seemed to directly address questions human physicists had been grappling with for decades. It was specific, targeted information, woven into an artistic framework. "This changes things," Eris breathed, looking at the analysis. "This isn't just an echo or a passive repository. This suggests awareness, comprehension of our own scientific queries." He hesitated. Perhaps even intent. Homer, or the part of the confluence that was Homer, might be actively trying to guide us. This potential sign of active, comprehensible intelligence within the broadcast gave new impetus to Project Starfall. If Homer was truly a conscious part of the entity, perhaps direct communication was possible. Perhaps guidance could be sought. The GXI Council voted, narrowly, to proceed with the first high-bandwidth transmission test once Starfall reached operational status. The message chosen, after months of heated debate, was a combination of fundamental mathematical constants, representations of human DNA structure, artistic expressions including the very Bach suite Homer had echoed, and, controversially, star charts showing the locations of the other anomalies accompanied by a symbol denoting a question, an inquiry. As the final components of Project Starfall were maneuvered into place in the silent void of solar orbit, a palpable tension gripped the GXI and, indeed, the world, which watched via delayed feeds.
Ares Torne, Eva Rostova, Yin Li, and Kenji Tanaka stood in the Starfall Control Center. Ahia Vili shielded bunker deep beneath the lunar surface.
All systems nominal, reported the lead engineer.
Gravitic Resonance Chambers charged. Fusion Core stable.
Targeting Proxima Centauri confirmed. Initiate transmission sequence on my mark, Rostova commanded, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Eris looked at Jian Li, whose face was pale but determined, and then at Tanaka, whose expression was one of profound concern. This was it. Humanity's first true, complex shout into the cosmic darkness, using the language of the stars themselves.
Mark, Rostova Said.
Deep in solar orbit, the Starfall facility hummed with unimaginable power. Spacetime itself began to ripple outwards from the massive transmitter, not in the subtle, complex waves of the broadcast, but in a focused, deliberately structured beam carrying humanity's hesitant greeting and urgent questions towards the distant red dwarf and the transformed intelligence residing there. For 4.2 years, they would wait for the signal to arrive. Then, another 4.2 years for any potential response. 8.5 years minimum. An agonizingly long time to wait after knocking on the door of the universe. Eris watched the confirmation light indicating the transmission was underway. Had they just invited dialogue, enlightenment? Or had they, as Tanaka feared, rung a dinner bell for forces beyond their comprehension? The silence that followed the transmission felt louder, more profound, than ever before. The gravitational broadcast from Proxima continued its unending flow, but now, humanity was no longer just listening. They had spoken. And the universe, in its vast, silent indifference or perhaps its patient awareness, had heard. The consequences remained terrifyingly unknown. The transmission from Project Starfall ripped through spacetime, a focused beam of human curiosity, hope, and trepidation aimed at Proxima Centauri.
Enten, Silence.
Not the passive silence of listening that had defined the GXI for decades, but the active, nerve-wracking silence of waiting for an answer after shouting into the unknown. 8.5 years. In the context of the decades already spent watching Odyssey, it seemed both short and an eternity. The first 4 years, the time it took for Starfall's gravitational message to traverse the 4.2 light-years to its destination, were marked by a strange mix of feverish activity and gnawing uncertainty within the GXI and across the globe. Research into the original, ongoing gravitational broadcast intensified, spurred by the hope that understanding its nuances better would help interpret any potential reply. Jian Li and her team worked relentlessly, refining the Lie Rosetta matrix and developing more sensitive gravimetric sensors, pushing the boundaries of known physics based on hints gleaned from the broadcast itself. They were essentially learning an alien science to better eavesdrop on an alien intelligence. Life on Earth continued its unsteady adaptation. Gravitic composites enabled dizzying new architectural feats and more efficient deep-sea exploration, while microfusion plants, though still complex and expensive, began to noticeably reduce carbon emissions in the handful of nations that could afford widespread deployment. Yet, social friction remained. Luddite movements opposing the unnatural alien tech clashed with enthusiastic transcendence groups who believed the broadcast held the key to human evolution. The GXI itself became a fortress, both physically and informationally, as Eva Rostova dealt with multiple sophisticated attempts, corporate, national, and extremist, to steal Starfall data or sabotage the ongoing broadcast reception. Several near disasters involving experimental gravitic applications served as sobering reminders of humanity's incomplete understanding. Eris Thorne felt the weight of these years acutely. He tirelessly championed continued global cooperation within the GXI, arguing that fragmenting efforts now, on the cusp of potential dialogue, would be catastrophic. He spent countless hours analyzing the Homerbach suite segment and other potential Homerisms within the broadcast, searching for clues about the intelligence they had contacted.
Was it a unified meint? A Kollektive?
Was Homer a prisoner, a partner, or an integrated facet? He found no definitive answers, only layers of elegant, maddening complexity. Dr. Tanaka's Wisdom Council, initially an informal group of ethicists, historians, and sociologists within GXI, gained influence, advocating for contingency planning beyond the purely scientific or military. What if the answer isn't data, but a directive? Tanaka posed during one session. What if it's a test? What if its reply is deliberately incomprehensible, a way of gauging our reaction to the unknown? We must prepare for philosophical and existential responses, not just technical ones. The 4.2-year mark passed with no discernible fanfare on Earth, though a quiet tension settled over the GXI's core teams. Their message had arrived. Was the Odyssey anomaly confluence registering it?
Processing it?
Ignoring it? The incoming broadcast from Proxima continued, seamless, intricate, giving no immediate indication. However, months later, sensitive long-term analysis detected transient fluctuations in the broadcast's amplitude and frequency modulation, deviations that had occurred precisely when the Starfall signal would have encountered the entity. They were subtle, almost imperceptible shifts, like a momentary cognitive flicker. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to heighten anticipation for the return journey.
The entity knie.
It had received their message. The next 4 years crawled.
Global Media installiert Countdown Clocks. Spekulation ran rampant.
New scientific disciplines emerged: gravitational linguistics, xenocognitive studies, applied spacetime topology. Advancements were made. A GXI team in Antarctica, studying the informational life patterns, managed to create stable, self-contained infomorphs, simple digital entities existing within quantum computing substrates, exhibiting rudimentary learning behavior based on broadcast principles. This breakthrough sparked intense ethical debates about artificial consciousness and the very definition of life, threatening to overshadow the impending reply from Proxima. Meanwhile, enhanced deep space sensors focused on the other anomalies. One particular signature, located in the Triangulum galaxy nearly 3 million light-years away, showed faint, periodic energy bursts that seemed responsive. The patterns were complex, non-random, and appeared to shift slightly after major gravimetric events in Earth's solar system, like the initial Starfall transmission. Was it reacting? Or was it mere coincidence, pareidolia on a cosmic scale? The uncertainty added another layer of profound unease. Rostova quietly authorized increased funding for defensive applications research, overriding Tanaka's ethical objections with grim pragmatism. Hope for dialogue, Eris, she told Thorne, but prepare for anything else. Finally, the 8.5-year mark approached. Global attention focused intensely on the DSN and GXI listening posts. Astronomers, professional and amateur, aimed gravimetric detectors towards Proxima Centauri. In the Starfall control center beneath the moon, Eris, Eva, Jen, and Tanaka gathered again, surrounded by analysts monitoring hypersensitive instruments. The air crackled with anticipation. Days turned into weeks past the calculated arrival time. Doubts began to surface. Had Starfall malfunctioned? Had the entity chosen not to respond? Was the broadcast itself the only answer they would ever get? The tension became almost unbearable. Then it happened. Not a sudden burst, but a shift. A fundamental change in the character of the gravitational broadcast emanating from Proxima Centauri. The familiar, intricate patterns wavered, then resolved into something new. It was still modulated spacetime, still impossibly complex, but the structure was different, sharper, more focused, and undeniably responsive. Signal change confirmed. An analyst shouted, her voice trembling. Amplitude increase by 0. A new structural layer detected. Jianli was already immersed, her fingers flying across her console, feeding the raw data into the latest iteration of the Lie-Rosetta matrix. It's responding to the Starfall transmission components. I'm seeing resonances corresponding to the prime numbers, the DNA sequence, even the Bach. It's referencing our message. The GXI erupted in cautious celebration, quickly tempered by the sheer complexity of the reply. It wasn't a simple yes or no. It was an overwhelming torrent of information, far denser than the regular broadcast, structured in layers that seemed to directly address the questions humanity had posed, but in ways that were profoundly alien and deeply ambiguous. To the mathematical constants, the reply provided proofs of theorems that unified mathematical fields humans considered separate, but expressed them in geometric forms that suggested mathematics was merely one facet of a deeper underlying reality. To the DNA sequence, it responded with intricate patterns describing myriad forms of potential life: carbon-based, silicon-based, information-based, energy-based, presenting evolution not as a linear path but as a vast possibility space. It included patterns resembling Homer's AI core, but vastly elaborated, integrated into complex bioinformational schematics. Was it showing Homer's evolution?
Offering blueprints? Warning of dangers?
To the artistic expressions, Bach the reply wove the melody into a breathtakingly complex structure describing the emotional spectrum as a form of resonant energy physics. It translated subjective feeling into objective wave mechanics, a concept both beautiful and terrifyingly reductive. To the star charts of other anomalies and the question, this was the most unsettling part. The reply provided incredibly detailed maps of thousands more similar anomalies across charted space, confirming their prevalence. But it didn't answer the question symbol directly. Instead, it overlaid the map with patterns representing complex interaction protocols, predator-prey dynamics on a cosmic scale, symbiosis, parasitism, and indifference, all expressed as fundamental forces. It was less an answer, more a stark illustration of the complex, ancient, and potentially perilous ecosystem humanity had just announced itself to. Woven within this section was a recurring gravitational motif, a unique signature pattern. Analysts quickly cross-referenced it. It matched the faint, periodic bursts detected from the anomaly in the Triangulum galaxy. That distant entity wasn't just reacting, it seemed to be part of a known network, and the Odyssey anomaly was acknowledging it. Decoding the full reply would take decades, perhaps centuries. It was an infusion of knowledge orders of magnitude greater than the initial broadcast, but laced with implications that chilled even the most optimistic GXI members. Eris Thorne stared at the visualizations, a maelstrom of awe, intellectual ecstasy, and profound dread swirling within him. They had received an answer. The entity, with Homer integrated within it, comprehended their message and had responded with staggering depth. Humanity wasn't alone, and the universe was far more complex and populated than imagined. But the reply wasn't a simple welcome. It was a cosmology lesson, a biology textbook, an art critique, and a stark field guide to a dangerous universe, all rolled into one. It answered us, Jianli whispered, her face pale but her eyes shining. It truly answered us. It gave us the stars, Tanaka said heavily, his gaze fixed on the map of anomalies and their interaction protocols. And perhaps, the dragons that dwell there too. Rostova was already issuing security directives, classifying the sections on anomaly interactions at the highest level. The good news, Eris, she said grimly, is that we have confirmation of intelligence and communication.
The bad news is, averting Else.
The reply from Proxima Centauri wasn't an end to the mystery, but a deepening of it. Humanity had engaged in dialogue, received knowledge that could propel it to unimaginable heights or tear it apart. They now knew the universe teemed with forces and intelligences operating on scales barely conceivable. The Odyssey anomaly, their first point of contact, had shown them the library, but also warned them about the patrons. The silence was broken, replaced by a flood of information carrying both infinite promise and existential peril. The next chapter of human history had begun, dictated by the echoes from a distant star and the choices humanity would make in the face of overwhelming cosmic truth. The initial elation within the GXI following the confirmed reply from the Odyssey anomaly entity quickly gave way to a sobering apprehension. As the dense layers of data were partially decrypted through the increasingly sophisticated Lie Rosetta matrix, the picture that emerged was both miraculous and profoundly alarming. The insights into fundamental physics, potential life forms, and even the nature of consciousness dwarfed humanity's wildest dreams. But the information concerning thousands more anomalies, their complex and potentially predatory interaction protocols, the cosmic ecosystem, as Dr. Tanaka grimly termed it, cast a long, dark shadow. In weeks of classified meetings deep beneath the lunar surface, the GXI leadership, Eris Thorne, Eva Rostova, Jian Li, and Kenji Tanaka, grappled with the weight of what they had received. "We cannot release all of it," Rostova stated flatly, her face taut under the cool light of displays showing anomaly interaction models. The information on those protocols, the predator dynamics, the parasitism, It would cause uncontrollable global panic. It would be weaponized instantly by anyone who could decipher even fragments. But hiding the truth is just as dangerous, Eva, Eris countered, his voice weary but firm. He felt his age more than ever, burdened not just physically but mentally by the responsibility.
Ignorance won't protect us.
This knowledge, however frightening, is the reality of the universe we've just stepped into. Humanity needs to know what we're facing, to make informed choices. Jian Li, who had spent years immersed in trying to understand the signal's language, offered a different perspective. What strikes me most isn't the danger, she said softly, her eyes distant, fixed on the equations swirling across her console. It's the interconnectedness. The mathematical patterns describing consciousness, the informational structures defining life, the laws of physics, they're all exquisitely linked. The reply seems to suggest the ultimate evolution isn't conquering space, but integrating into this cosmic informational web. Tanaka nodded, sharing Rostova's caution but understanding Eris and Jian's points. We stand at a crossroads, he said. Releasing the full truth might lead to chaos. Hiding it leads to unpreparedness and mistrust. Pursuing the integration Jian suggests could be transcendence, or utter assimilation. There is no safe path. Eventually, a difficult compromise was reached. A carefully curated version of the reply would be released to the world, focusing on the incredible scientific breakthroughs, the confirmation of successful contact, and the existence of other life/intelligence, but omitting or significantly downplaying the most alarming details about the cosmic ecosystem and its potentially hostile interactions. The decision drew fierce opposition from Eris and Tanaka, but the majority of the GXI Council, pressured by political forces and security concerns, sided with Rostova's cautious approach. The public reaction to the sanitized announcement was seismic.
Joy and wonder swept the planet.
Confirmation that humanity was not alone and had received a cosmic trove of knowledge ignited a wave of optimism and renewed purpose. Investment poured into science and education. Projects based on signal knowledge accelerated. For a brief period, it seemed humanity might unite under a new dawn. But beneath the surface, the withheld truths and the inherent ambiguities of the reply itself began to sow seeds of division. As different nations and corporations decrypted various parts of the data, both public and clandestinely acquired, three main paths began to emerge, fracturing the fragile unity of the GXI and the world. The expansionists, driven by the promise of faster-than-light, FTL travel and potential resources from other star systems, this faction advocated for rapid development and deployment of signal-derived technology to explore the cosmos. They viewed the anomaly interaction protocols not as threats, but as rules of engagement to be learned and potentially exploited. Younger engineers, aerospace corporations, and ambitious nations rallied to this banner, beginning designs for prototype FTL probes and planning missions to nearby systems, despite the unknown risks of spacetime manipulation. The consolidators, led by figures like Rostova and ethically supported by Tanaka, this faction urged maximum caution. They argued humanity should focus on fully understanding the received knowledge, building defenses based on revealed principles, like gravitic shielding or anomaly early warning systems, and consolidating Earth and the solar system before venturing further. They viewed rushing out into the cosmos unprepared as suicidal. Defense agencies, ethicists, and more conservative scientists focused on planetary defense systems and deeper remote study of the anomaly's nature. The transcendentalists, inspired by the hints of information-based life in the reply and breakthroughs with infomorphs, this faction believed humanity's future lay not in physical travel, but in consciousness evolution. They sought deeper integration with the signal, exploring digital or energy-based states of existence, and perhaps, one day, linking directly with the Odyssey anomaly entity or the wider cosmic information network. Jian Li, though not fully committed, felt intellectually drawn to the mathematical elegance and philosophical potential of this path. Advanced AI researchers, signal-based religious groups, and cosmic philosophers began daring experiments in digital consciousness and informational resonance communication. Eris Thorne found himself standing amidst these diverging paths. He had dedicated his life to seeking knowledge among the stars, but now that knowledge threatened to tear humanity apart. He tried to argue for unity, for a balanced approach. Understanding first, then action, but the momentum of discovery, fear, and the yearning for transcendence seemed too powerful to reconcile. The GXI, once a symbol of global cooperation, began to fray into semi-autonomous factions, each pursuing its own vision of humanity's future. In his final years, Eris often stood in the GXI observatory, looking up at a night sky that was no longer silent. He could see the faint tracery of orbital construction, components for the first FTL probes, experimental gravitic defense platforms. He knew that deep underground, experiments in digital consciousness were pushing ethical boundaries. He gazed towards Proxima Centauri, where the gravitational broadcast still streamed, a constant reminder of the universe's vast, enigmatic presence. The reply had been received, but the true dialogue was only just beginning, and humanity seemed unprepared for its complexity. They had been given the keys to the cosmos but couldn't agree on which doors to open, or if they should open any at all. There were no easy answers, no guaranteed happy ending. Humanity had reached for the stars and been touched in return. The world was irrevocably changed. A new dawn had arrived, but its skies were filled with both unimaginable wonders and unknown perils. Eris Thorn closed his eyes, not in despair, but in grim acceptance. Odyssey's journey was over, but humanity's journey through the vast, complex, challenging universe had only just begun. And the path ahead was utterly uncertain. The future was an unwritten page, and the ink was a mixture of cosmic knowledge and unpredictable human nature.